I am very pleased to introduce you to Jill Koob. Jill is a certified senior professional in HR and a senior certified professional with the Society of HR Management. She is the founder of Energize HR, and Energize HR is an HR consulting firm that focuses on training and strategic recruiting and organizational development, and of course, HR support. And prior to founding her own company, Jill served as a VP for a Houston-based PEO, where they received numerous awards, including the Best Place to Work and Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies. Jill brings over 20 years of strategic HR experience into play. Also want to introduce you to Dr. Sandra Steen. She is a CEO and executive leadership coach, business consultant, master facilitator, and keynote motivational speaker and author. She is the founder and CEO of Sandra Steen Consulting. She's an internationally acclaimed speaking, training, and consultant, and her firm is as well. She is an established in the areas of inspiration and motivation, sales and customer service, communication and leadership, and diversity in the workplace. So you two, I'm going to turn this over to you. Please, what did I miss and what are we going to learn today?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for this opportunity and for this platform. So it's certainly relevant to the timing and the current events. And today, what we're going to do in the time that we're spending together, we're going to get towards some definition of racism. We hear that term, but what really does it mean? And how does that differ from a stereotype or a bias? We're also going to leave you with a position for progress. So we have some quick steps that you can evaluate on how to upgrade yourself. And then my colleague, the very talented Jill Koob, will be talking about hashtags and those perceptions versus principles. Hashtag Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. So that's going to be a lot of our conversation. We'll look at some survey and some statistics, and we'll leave you with some actionable steps for a discrimination-free workplace. And we've gotten some great questions. And Anissa, I understand that there will be questions that can come through the chat box, and we'll address some of those as well. So let's get started with something that we all know. We are not a monolithic culture. Let's start there. We're not a monolithic culture. And what does that mean? So, and I want to break this down because we're not a monolithic culture. And the outer circle, you've seen that probably in many instances if you've gone through any type of inclusion training. There are primary ways that we are divided, and then there are secondary ways in which we differ. Let me take the divided and say differ. So there's work background, things like education, religious beliefs, and those are things that can, draw boundaries and lines and differing opinions and perspectives. And then the green is basically our assignment at birth. Now we know that sometimes the choices can lead that assignment to change. But for the most part, age, race, ethnicity, physical qualities, gender, and appearances, those are some assignments that can come with birth. What does this really mean? We're going to differ, and I want to bring this point out as we're talking about current events. The African American culture, the Black culture, those are two particular terms that are preferred among Black and African Americans. They are not a monolithic culture either. You're going to find within the Black race, there are going to be differing opinions about the same topic. So I want to keep that in mind because no one person can speak for all Black or African Americans. Neither can one person speak for all white Americans. So what does this mean? Let's look at how we process ourselves for self-examination, because all of us need to look in the mirror. But before we look in the mirror, we've got to ask ourselves, how did we learn the views that we hold? Where did they come from? Well, first of all, we're all born into the world with no information. We're born with purpose, but we had no information. That is true. However you look at it, it's true. Now, what happens is we're born into the world, we're being influenced by people we trust. I want to stop and emphasize that and even give a picture of how that looks, because who are the people we trust? Mom, dad, it could be family members, it could be a teacher, it could be a preacher, but they're people we trust. Now, I want to use this example because I call this the bitter cup. And so, let's say that somebody that you know and trust, they put into the cup, those people are no good. You can never trust those people. And you know what? I never liked those people. Now, here's their bitter cup and their influences. And what do? They give you the cup and say, drink. And now you're drinking the bitter cup. What are you learning? You're learning stereotypes. You're learning biases. You're learning myths and misinformation. One of the bitter cups, you know, if I take it away from race and go gender, how many times has mom said, I don't trust men. They're no good. Look at what your father did to me. Okay, here, drink. And so the bitter cup gets passed on, and it's misinformation. Now, what happens in the cycle of self-examination is that we are enhancing the learning or we're contradicting it. Now, where are we getting the learning or the contradiction? We're getting it from the media, news, what we're watching on CNN or Fox News, you name it. It's going to contradict or it's going to continue to enforce what the bitter cup gave us. It could be social media. All you have to do is scroll. And there are people, and they may post an opinion, a thought that was based on something 5 years ago. Oh, never mind the facts. This is my opinion. And we're learning or we're being contradicted. It could be at church. It's learned or contradicted. It could be within your social circles. How many people are choosing people that have like opinions? Or are in our social circles, are we choosing people who just think like us, or they may bring a different opinion? Personally, I like having different opinions. It helps to sharpen the saw. Now, what happens in the cycle is that we have a reaction to what we learn. We judge it, and we adapt it as behavior. And then there's an action or a reaction. We adapt it, the bitter cup, we've drinking it. Now we're adapting, judging the behavior. And what happens? It gets passed on to the next generation. So we ask ourselves in the self-examination cycle, how do we break it? And we want to continue on with that question and that thought, because we want to face the future with knowledge. Now, how do we face the future with knowledge? First of all, I want to drive this point home. Do not be afraid. Fear is an attraction. What you fear the most comes upon you. If you put your eyes on missing, if you're on a bicycle and you want to miss the tree and you're so afraid of the tree or run into the tree, what happens when you stare at it? You run into it. And so our fears must be faced with knowledge, because if we up the knowledge, the fear will come down. How do we increase the knowledge? Through training and coaching and conscious choosing. And I'm going to suggest to you, I'm not going to go through the details of it. I'm going to suggest to you there are actually 5 relationships that everybody needs to grow. If you want to grow, you need these 5 relationships. You need a role model. You need a coach and a mentor. You need friends. You need a partner, and you need a community. With those 5 relationships, we are positioned to question our stereotypes. We can question our biases and our myths, and that's going to challenge us to learn new information. And what's going to happen when we learn new information? We're going to have a reaction to love and empower. Now, let me just stop, because I'm talking to corporate America. Corporate America, we don't have emotions, right? Emotions are not allowed in corporate. That's the soft stuff, right? Wrong. See, the thing is, we say that that's soft and emotions aren't allowed, but the emotion of anger shows up at work. The emotion of frustration shows up at work. I'm suggesting that the emotion of love is also appropriate, not in the context of any type of sexual harassment. I'm saying love in the context of understanding and support. You know what? Nothing will change until you at some point will touch it with love. You can continue to touch it with anger. You can touch it with frustration. You can touch it with every other emotion, but the context of change happens when love hits it in some, and love and understanding hits it in some context. Then this will result in transformation, renewed minds, both mentally and spiritually. Again, we are in corporate America, but we are also mental beings as well as spiritual beings, and we must touch every area of our being. Now, once we've done that, perhaps we can get rid of this golden calf of the age. You know, a golden calf is something you worship. It's something you bow down to. And I'll say that if there's anything that's being worshiped at this time, and at this in the 2020 year, it's the opinion. All you have to do is scroll. People are not bowing down to facts. They're bowing down to feelings. Don't confuse my opinion with the facts. You know, this is where I bow. And not only are we asking, are we bowing to the opinion, we're asking everybody else to bow to our opinions. Now, what I want to do is take you through a really quick little exercise. And what I'm going to do in just a moment, I'm going to flash an image. And if you have the ability to write. If not, you can make a mental picture, because I'm going to ask you to describe what I flash for you. Okay, so I want you to give me a description. I'm going to put up image number 1. Now, I collected these images out of magazines. I have a collection of pictures from magazines. So these are magazine pictures, and I've had these for over 10 years, and I use them for various different things, including this. So this is an image, and I'm going to ask you to describe this image. Describe this image, okay? Let's look at the next image. I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. When you look at this image, give me a description of this image, okay? Got it? All right. Okay, good. I got a, Shayla, thank you. All right, we've got some descriptions. Somebody said cowboys. Somebody said a kind older woman. Thank you. Let's get another image. All right, give me a description of this image. A description of this image. All right, and I got a 2 men and cowboys for the next image. Okay, this is a disagreement. Somebody's saying conflict, okay? All right, those are your descriptions. Okay, let's go back to the first image. Let's go back to the first image. Now, somebody said a kind, older, thoughtful woman. Let me just say, ladies and gentlemen, that's not a description, it's an interpretation. But we do it all the time. And it leads us into our biases, and it seems just so, you know, it seems so pure. Yeah, kind, thoughtful woman. But how many times have we looked at an image like this and said, life is over for her? You know, she's really, really too old to be doing anything of much, and she looks pretty sad. How about that this image is a best-selling, a New York Times best-selling author? How about that? That's not a first interpretation. Why? Because we're in the circle of our influence and our experience. Let's look at the next image. And we had cowboys. We had 2 gentlemen. A description would be 2 men with white shirts, jeans on, and hats. An interpretation would be cowboys. But let me just tell you, or you can imagine that if I were flashing this image to African Americans, the interpretation would be racist. That's not a description, it's an interpretation. Well, if I have some type of stereotype or bias that all men who dress like this are also racist, guess what? When this image shows, that's what I think. Let's look at the third image. Feeling over facts. Now, we heard conflict, controversy. Now, these are actually in various different audiences. I've heard things like criminals, I've heard thugs, I've heard rappers, all interpretations, never a description in which I requested. Now, here's the deal. These young men are recording artists, very successful recording artists, and they don't do rap. They do some really traditional music. But because of the biases and the stereotypes in our mind, we have an interesting kind of interpretation. Now, let me just give you a moment to think about this. If I were to flash these images, perhaps to rookie police officers who were being trained, and they were given no information and said, you're going to have to pull the trigger on one of these images, but you have no background information, what image do you think they would choose? I think most of us know that. So what I want to do now is go into some self-examination where we look at what we mean by stereotypes. Stereotypes are generalizations. We all have them. Part of them can be true, but we start to see everybody the same. We have no ability to differentiate based on our circle of influence, based on our bitter cup. We start to see anybody with the white shirt and cowboy hat is racist. Anybody as a young black male, criminal. And so we have to have self-examination. Now let's go into what our biases. Biases become, now stereotype is a generalization, but then I start to place judgment on that stereotype. And I have an unfavorable opinion without knowledge or experience. It doesn't make it right because I have an experience, it just is. So I'm not putting wrong or right to it, but let's define what it is. So prejudice versus preference. So a bias is more toward a prejudice. So I have an unfavorable opinion based on something. I see you with a white hat and you have jeans on. My opinion is you got to be racist. Okay. I see the young black male. Oh, he's up to no good. All right. So let's talk about what the next definition would be. Now, when we're understanding biases, I want, because of the nature of our audience, I just want to raise your awareness where these biases can show up. There are subtle assumptions that can happen and have big impact on who you're hiring, work conditions, exceptions, promotions, terminations. So the self-examination, the look in the mirror, is to know if I have an unfavorable opinion based on a previous experience, and does it have a subtle or big impact on some power that I've been given? Have I been given a bitter cup that I've been drinking from even childhood that's now influencing my decisions as an adult? Let's move on and talk about prejudice. Now, prejudice is a judgment, and it is a positive or a negative attitude, and it's not based on objective facts or experience. So you start to see that prejudice and biases are really, they are very connected and they have a close kinship to each other. Prejudice. Let's look at our next definition. Wow, there it is, the isms. The isms. Isms go beyond I don't like you. Isms go into the realm of I'm going to deprive you of something you may be entitled to, but because of my prejudice or bias, I'm going to deprive you of it. So if I have any type of prejudice or bias toward older workers, I like young, I like millennial, I like people with energy. And so when I see the first image of the older woman, I don't think New York Times bestseller. I think not capable, older, life is over. And so I've gone into ageism. If I have a previous experience with women, and I think that it's a man's world. And so my preference, my prejudice, my bias is toward putting men in powerful position. I have gone beyond I don't like. I actually deprive women who are capable, and I am now in sexism. And so what does an ism combine? An ism combines power and prejudice. So I don't like you, so I'm going to deprive you of something that you're entitled to. And now we have racism. So let's go into self-examination. And what is the question that we all must ask today? What do I truly believe? Have I had the bitter cup experience that has created any myths, misinformation? Have I had a bad experience that now I look into the mirror and can I say this? Do I stand against injustice and racism? Now, let me give you the caveat to this. I'm not talking about a political platform. It doesn't matter what you believe. You could believe that the moon is made of cheese, but do you stand against injustice and racism? You could be on the left side, you could be on the right side, but do you believe that you should stand against injustice and racism? I would say today that racism has now evolved. It is no longer Black against white. It's everybody against injustice and racism. How are we seeing it now? We're seeing the world join in. So it's all humanity saying we stand against injustice and racism. Now, what happens? This is a yes or no question. Do I stand against injustice and racism? And when the answer is yes, you're good to go to position yourself to progress. If the answer is, I really don't stand against injustice and racism, then it's back to the mirror to ask yourself why. What happened in your circle of influence? And how can you get to a point where you can say, yes, I stand against injustice and racism? I believe that every leader has to get to a point where they're asserting this statement. So if it's the governor, he's saying, regardless of his political party, he's saying to the state, we stand against injustice and racism. If it's the CEO, he's saying, the company is saying, we stand against injustice and racism. If it's the family leader, the father is saying to the family, we stand against injustice and racism. If it's the pastor of a church, he's saying to the church, we stand against injustice and racism. And I believe that once we all stand in a unified voice to say yes to this, we can go to whatever political corner, whatever belief system, we can go back to that, but we have a unified platform against injustice and racism. And now we're positioned to progress. And how do we position ourselves for progress? One, permit yourself to be upgraded. So you choose to learn, you choose to grow. And let me just put a little bit of caveat to that. Please don't put the pressure of your growth on any race of people. Well, those people need to tell me what to call them. And that is some truth to that, because people, we can even ask them, what do you prefer? Do you prefer Black? Do you prefer African American? I can tell you colored. We're not monolithic, but I can't find anybody that likes to be called colored. And certainly we would avoid the N-word at all costs. But beyond that, we put the responsibility of learning on ourselves and not on someone else. And we give someone the gift of listening. When's the last time somebody listened to you? We all want to be heard. We all want to have somebody that will just listen to us. We're not always wanting you to shake your head in agreement. Just hear me out. So give that gift on a daily basis. Honor feelings, don't discount them. So remember, your golden calf is what you worship, but don't expect everybody to worship your opinion. Don't discount the feelings of others. And give a 3-step apology if you must. Now, I've said this to thousands, and for some reason, it becomes a big takeaway. I'm going to give you an apology that I haven't found anybody disagree with this type of apology. When you apologize in this format, people will love you and they will thank you. Remember, there's no fear of making a mistake because we're not fearful. If we make a mistake, we do it in 3 steps. First step, this is what happened. John, this is why I called you and referred to you in this manner. This is what happened. The second step, this is why it happened. Well, in my upbringing, I was always taught that that was the respectful thing to say. I had no idea that it had shifted. My apologies. Third step, and most important step of an apology is, John, this is why it won't happen again, because I'm taking the upgrade and the information that you've given me today, and I won't be caught making that remark to any person of color. Thank you for this upgrade moment. Who can argue with that? Nobody. 3 steps. And then the last step, again, I know we're in the workplace, but don't you have a company that you've ever loved? Don't you have a boss that you loved? Don't you have a project that you loved? You know what? Passion is at the height of the emotional pyramid. Remember Abraham Hicks? And he said that if you find passion, you'll find joy and you'll find enthusiasm, which is at the height of the emotional pyramid. But if you go into boredom and if you go into frustration, you'll find yourself in the downward spiral headed toward depression. So find the passion, love it, find something you can love. You know, I've even found a way to touch my fears with love. When my fear shows up, I say, thank you, fear, because you have shown me a gap in my faith, in my ability to be positive. And I wouldn't have known it had you not shown up. Now, thank you for showing up. You can leave now. And so instead of fighting it and hitting it with anger and frustration, I touched it with love. And now the transformation can happen. So remember the topic, and whatever the person or the conversation, touch it with love and understanding. Because remember this, as we get ready to go into some more practical ways of dealing with this whole idea of Black Lives Matter, is that everybody simply, they want to be heard, they want to be understood. And you have the key to that, and you approach it with no fear. You got your 3-step apology ready, and you're ready to move into the knowledge, and the knowledge will take down the fear. And so my colleague is going to take us through some background information, some statistics, and then we're going to find out, we got answers to your questions, and she's got some real practical ways to handle this from an HR perspective. So Jill, take us away.
Dr. Steen, that was amazing.
Thank you.
It's hard. You're a hard act to follow, let me tell you. And I do not have any props. So I am getting to the heart of this presentation. Well, actually, Dr. Steen did the heart, and now I'm getting to the actual meat of Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. I think that this is definitely one of the most polarizing hashtags that we've had in my history, which it seems like it shouldn't be polarizing, but a lot of it is understanding and fear. Black Lives Matter hashtag was created by 3 Black women after George Zimmerman was acquitted from murder. The outrage of no accountability, and we all can relate to and connect with the lack of accountability when crimes happen, when people do you wrong, you just want justice. And so that is what the crux of Black Lives Matter is and was started for. I think that there has been some radical people that have attached themselves to Black Lives Matter, and people see that as, I believe Black Lives Matter, but I'm afraid of the rioting. I'm afraid of the looting. I'm afraid of police being targeted to be murdered. And so there is that perception. All Black Lives Matter. I think we can all agree on that. At least we should agree on that. And all lives matter. I think in principle, we can agree on that. But the hashtag all lives matter is seen as a protest to Black Lives Matter. It's not saying that Black Lives Matter only, it's just that we matter. That if we're killed, that there's justice, that we're in an equal playing field as everyone else. So it's, although it seems innocuous, all lives matter. That is the response. And actually, I will say, if I have any senior leadership or HR professionals on the call, I've seen on LinkedIn where they've responded to posts with hashtag all lives matter. And it is so polarizing. It is not, oh, okay, Pollyanna, everybody matters. It is Black lives are documented as being targeted in racial profiling. That is a fact. And we're going to look at some other things. This is people's perception. And when we look at perception, it can be so complex, but equally valid points from differing perspectives can appear to be contradictory. So all lives matter, Black lives matter. How can they be contradictory? And they are, from different perspectives, the truth, that person's truth. Because some of us have only fed our mind with a certain news outlet or a certain group of friends or certain social media. So I'm challenging everyone to really get down to the facts, because just like Dr. Steen said, on both sides, there's misinformation. Check your facts. And let's get to what we're supposed to do at work. I want to talk about business. So Starbucks in 2018 had 2 African Americans that were waiting for a business meeting. And me and my fiance can relate to this because we do real estate deals as well. And so you meet people in restaurants, you meet them at Starbucks. They were there early for a business meeting for a large real estate deal that was going to impact their families. Well, their business partner, the guy in the silver vest, was running a little late, and they were strategizing on what to discuss. And the manager at that Starbucks said, you need to buy something or leave. And they said, well, we're waiting for a business associate. We're going to, as soon as he gets here, we'll order. I've done that. I'm sure many other people have done that. It doesn't even occur to me that that would be a problem. They were arrested because they wouldn't leave that Starbucks. And the gentleman in the silver vest is like, what is happening? These guys were held in a cell till midnight. And that's where the hashtag going to Starbucks while Black. That is injustice. That's something that a lot of us can't relate to. So why am I bringing this up? Well, Starbucks just last week had banned their staff from wearing Black Lives Matter t-shirts and pins. And, you know, they mentioned it is part of our policy to not wear any political or religious items to work, because it can incite divisiveness and violence. And we want to make everybody feel comfortable and included in our Starbucks restaurants. The problem with that is Pride Month was just last month or this month, and they are allowing the LGBTQ community to wear pins and shirts to represent Pride, which some people don't feel comfortable with that. So it's like, why did you pick and choose? So they came back and they said, well, and I did read all of their articles. They're very pro racial justice, and they want diversity, but they didn't want Black Lives Matter. They felt that that was divisive. So I'm cautioning all business owners to know that Black Lives Matter, even though you may not agree with everything the movement is doing right now, like defunding police, which scares people, that the Black Lives Matter principle means something to so many people. And when you forbid people from saying Black Lives Matter, it's crushing. Oh, we do have comments. um, so the next day, this was on June 11th, the next day, because of the protests, Starbucks came back and said, you can wear your Black Lives Matter pins until we create our own t-shirts. So it is something that's not, no pun intended, black or white. You have to be principle centered for your organization. You have to create high trust, but you're also representing your company to the community in which you serve. And so this is not an easy subject, and it's very hard to do it in an hour. I was telling Anissa, this is conversations that we have to continue having over and over again and stay relevant with the news. Today, I saw in the news that an employee was fired because they had Black Lives Matter face mask on. And they were all supposed to wear face masks. Well, he had Black Lives Matter on it. He was terminated, and that made the news. And you can literally, as HR professionals, follow the letter of your handbook, but you have to understand the impact in what principle it is. So as a leadership team, these are larger discussions. It's not simple. It's not cut and dry. So SHRM had an article, and I encourage all HR professionals to go on the SHRM site because they do have a lot of resources for creating diversity in your workforce, but they have a great article called "Don't Be Silent" and tips to diffuse workplace tensions. And the author of the article broke out the perspectives into 4 areas, and these are generalizations. People can say, you know, I agree with some of this and I agree with some of that. I don't fully fall into these buckets, just like anything else. But justice requires action is an area where people are like, hey, we need to do whatever we can to bring justice to our cause. And then we have the second perspective, which is, you know what, I'm fully supportive of nonviolent protest, and we need to make change. I would think a lot of majority of people fit into that. There are a segment of the population that feel that this is not a big deal. We're blowing this out of proportion. I don't know anybody who's been discriminated against. This is just a few bad apples, and we need to get back to business. The protests are unnecessary. And then there's the ones that believe they're fearing. They see the news, they see social media. Maybe they had personal experience with rioters or looters or their police department, and they're like, we need law and order. We need to bring law and order back in place. We need to shut this down. So my question to you is there a wrong perspective, or is a perspective something we need to work with? We need to educate. We need to share what that company perspective is with culture, values, creating trust, creating a safe environment for people to have critical conversations. Dr. Steen put it beautifully. If you make a mistake, which we will all make a mistake, you need to be able to say, I don't want to offend you. You are my teammate. I'm here to learn. I'm here for us to have a good working relationship, and everybody strive for that. It isn't that they can't find the solution, and again, a lot of people don't feel that there is a problem. They can't see the problem because in their world, from their perspective, there is no problem. So there was a Pew research study done that asked the question, do you feel like there is a major issue for Blacks in discrimination? About half of the white respondents said yes, and 84% of the respondents who were Black said yes, there is racial discrimination. 51% said they had less access to high-paying jobs. 76 said they had less access to high-paying jobs. Lack of good role models, you had 45% make that judgment that Blacks don't have access to good role models. And more than half of the white recipients of the research respondents said that they had family instability, while 42% said they had family. And so these are their perspectives shown in a research study. Also, this is how does race impact getting ahead? The white respondent said 45% said it helped a little or it helped a lot. Half of them said it doesn't matter. They hired me for my qualifications. 52% said it hurt them. They weren't able to get ahead because of their race. Look at the disparity there. That's perception. So if you don't think there's a problem, then you need to see from another perspective, from another side of the issue. These are facts. The median annual earnings for workers with a bachelor degree, a 4-year degree, is 20% less for African American workers than they are for white workers and Asian workers. And for advanced degrees, it's almost 45% difference. That's shocking. And so this is where HR and business owners need to be able to measure their salaries, their hiring, promotions. This should not happen. We should not have this much disparity. So next steps. We need to educate ourselves. Just like Dr. Steen said, we need to educate ourselves on what the facts are so that we can have some good conversation, we can steer our companies, we can be relevant to know what's happening in the landscape and not say, I'm just going to put blinders on, it doesn't matter, I'm going to hope this goes away. This whole thing will blow over. It's not going to blow over. We need to address it. We need to train our teams. And some of the most important ways that we can train our teams, other than diversity inclusion, other than on our policies, which should be a zero tolerance anti-discrimination policies, is that we need to train them to have more empathy. We need to increase their emotional intelligence. We need to help them learn how to de-escalate a situation, because that is a critical skill in today's society. You see minor incidences that just spiral out of control. We all need those skills. We need management and leadership development. And then we have to track. Whatever gets measured gets done. We need to absolutely track all the applicants versus hire by race. We need to look at promotion. We need to look at salaries. Is there a disparity? Terms. Now we can say, I'm not racist. We need to measure. We need to train. We need to do self-evaluation. I'm not biased. I'm not prejudiced. Listen, we all have biases. We all have prejudice. We need to make sure that it doesn't turn into an ism, as Dr. Steen said. And then we need feedback surveys. I'm a big fan of the Net Promoter Score, which you actually get a measure and an open-ended question, and then you can see, you can stay connected with your employees. I will tell you, the teams and the cultures that have high trust amongst their teammates, and they have transparency and are able to have conversations, are going to grow stronger. Those that are toxic, that have silos, that can't communicate, are going to struggle. I'm frozen. There we go. Specifically on talent management, we need to look at our current salaries by position and demographic and ban salary history questions. And why do I say that? Because we all want a good deal. If somebody if they made $30,000 at their last job, I'll give them $31,000, even though the salary band for this job is 40 to 45. You have to create salary bands and pay what that position is at market. Otherwise, you're going to have not only disparity, you could have discrimination suits. It really is. It may be innocent, saying, oh, well, that's all they wanted, they're happy. But no, as a company, it's best practice. And have objective screening and performance tools. Use a validated profile assessment. Make sure that it is valid. Make sure that it mirrors for the success or predictive success of that position. And also, these are the top 10 de-escalation tips. You can pull this up on Crisis Prevention Institute, but be empathetic and non-judgmental. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all learning. We just need to be patient and think the best. Give benefit of the doubt, think the best of each other. Respect each other. If something is offensive to somebody, by all means, do not do it intentionally because it's your right. That is not tolerated in a workplace, in most workplaces. Stay true to your company values, your culture, and what your overall objective is. And avoid overreacting. Focus on feelings, ignore challenging questions because some people will bait, set limits, and choose wisely which you insist upon. But do not shrink when you are entitled to something. And allow silence for reflection and time for decisions. People are really challenging themselves. A lot of people are really challenging themselves, and people don't like to make mistakes, but we need to give some space to be able to have those conversations. So the secret of change is to focus all of our energy on not fighting the old, but on building the new.